Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and I'm not even gonna lie about Donny Cates. Initially when Donny Cates started Venom, and he did like Thanos Wins and stuff like that, but a lot of Donny Cates' early work was like miniseries, and so there was a part of me that was looking at his Venom run, and I wouldn't say that I thought he was a one-off, but a lot of times you see writers who do like a miniseries, they do really well, they get a character, they do really well, then they switch over to somebody else and they do terrible. A really good example of this is Brian Michael Bendis, who wrote some really good stuff in Marvel, then he went to DC, wrote Superman, and it was garbage. And so I was a little hesitant. I'm not even gonna lie, I was a little hesitant when Donny Cates started writing Thor. But between the Devourer King, and I was just like, dude, this is amazing. And then Prey, this second story arc, it's awesome, right? So here's the thing. What I want to do here is I want to explain something really quick when it comes to the nature of Donald Blake in Marvel Comics, right? So Donald Blake, as most of you guys know, was the original identity or the alter ego that Thor had when he first started appearing in Marvel Comics, right? The idea was that somewhere along the line, Odin decided Thor was too haughty and arrogant, and so he basically ended up creating a kind of fictional persona in the form of Donald Blake, and then confined Thor to that identity on Earth. And then like a decade after that, he discovered the walking stick in the cave, and then he struck it on the ground, and then he got the hammer, and then over time his memory started coming back, right? Thor 159 by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby is the first time that you really get the full-on origin of Thor in terms of how it relates to like the Donald Blake identity and all that kind of stuff. But over the years in Marvel, there were a lot of attempts to cast aside the Donald Blake persona and replace it with somebody else, right? So if you go into Tom DeFalco's run, you get Eric Masterson. You go into Dan Jurgens' run, you get Jake Olsen. And it was this attempt to like replace Donald Blake and to say like, okay, well, Eric Masterson will be the identity of Thor now. And then like Jake Olsen, who is a paramedic, will be the identity of Thor. And by and large, there were some other things that kind of went into it, right? You had like Shattered Heroes, where like Donald Blake came back, kind of a continuation from what happened when he returned during J. Michael Straczynski's run on Thor. The reality of what Donny Cates is doing here is essentially wiping all that away. Or a good portion of it anyway. Eric Masterson remains, a few things remain here, and we'll make sense of this as we kind of go on, but he also seems to sort of eliminate the entire concept of Shattered Heroes, which in reality I have no complaints about. That story was kind of terrible when it came to Thor. But the cool thing about this is that Donny Cates kind of kicks things off and says, okay, so like the notion of Donald Blake is that he first appeared, it's kind of the alternate identity of Thor. He was created by Odin, that kind of a thing. And the big question that a lot of people kind of had, at least in the early days, before it was really fleshed out by Walt Simonson and other writers, even though it wasn't really hammered out in any real fine and meaningful way, is that whenever Thor changes into Donald Blake, where does Donald Blake go, right? We knew where Thor went, and we were kind of given that answer to a degree in J. Michael Straczynski's Thor, in the sense that when Thor Odinson changes into Donald Blake, that Thor goes to a kind of afterlife, right? Like a realm of nothingness, so to speak, where he like communes with the past gods and things like that. So think of it as something as like the Thor equivalent to when like Black Panther communes with the former Black Panthers of his realm in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's something akin to that. And then when Donald Blake turned into Thor, we kind of got this little bit of an explanation from J. Michael Straczynski's, but it was just kind of thrown away, right, by a lot of Marvel writers that came after him. And so what we're basically told here by Donny Cates is that whenever Thor turns into Donald Blake, Thor goes to wherever he's supposed to go. But when Donald Blake turns back into Thor, Donald Blake basically goes to a paradise, right? He goes to this realm that was created under the tree of Yggdrasil by Odin, where it's basically a paradise, right? Where and it's one of these things where it wasn't really supposed to be there for eternity, right? It was one of these things where like they would kind of routinely change back and forth, and Odin didn't really seem to give a whole lot of thought to this concept, but it looked like a paradise everlasting. It basically stretched on for infinity. And the reality was, whenever Donald Blake was here, time really had no meaning, so he wouldn't really know how much time had passed between the moments when he was Thor and when he was here. The reason why that didn't really matter in the past was because Thor and Donald Blake would switch places so often that even if like a week or two had passed, it would be like that, and it would take virtually no time for Donald Blake to catch up on what he had essentially missed. But what's basically been going on here, that Thor has been Thor for so long, and Donald Blake has been in that realm for so long, that a huge amount of time has passed. But there's actually another caveat to this. So you end up having this kind of meeting between Loki and Odinson, and Thor just kind of petitions Loki and says, hey man, like I need to go on a personal journey, that kind of thing. I need you to keep an eye out on Asgard for me. And Loki keeps trying to get Thor to spill the beans because Loki really knows what's going on, and Thor's a little hesitant to do it. And then Loki's like, okay, fine. So he basically grabs the hammer and then throws it at Thor. Now, this is not designed to be like, oh my god, Loki lifted the hammer of Thor, wow, it's not designed to be that way. Instead, the notion that other people can lift Thor's hammer beyond someone who is worthy is really kind of an on-running plot thread in what Donny Cates has been doing. That the Asgardian magics that bind the hammer and all that kind of stuff have been breaking down, right, ever since he became the new Odin. The magic that binds Asgard, the magic that determines who can wield the hammer and who can't, is all kind of eroding. We don't really know why, we just know that it is. And so because Loki had figured it out, he's like, okay, so like you want to know why this is happening? And the response of Thor is basically yes. And I want to go on a journey to figure out why. And Loki's kind of like, okay, fine, then like we can do that, right? Like you go commune with the elder gods and talk to them and find out what's happening, and I'll keep an eye out here and basically make sure everything's okay. The problem with this is that Thor was supposed to transition to this kind of elder guard realm. Instead, when he strikes the hammer on the ground, he falls through that realm and then lands in the realm of Donald Blake. And when he gets there, everybody's dead, right? It's just a massacre. Like everything's just kind of gone to pandemonium. And it looks like by all standards of measurement, Donald Blake has lost his mind. And in fact, he has, because what we end up learning is that the world serpent has basically been killed here, right? It's been destroyed here by Donald Blake himself, which is something that's thought to have been insurmountable for a couple reasons. One, because the world serpent was never meant to be able to access this area. And two, because Donald Blake was just a guy. And so there's no real indication, because as soon as they switch places, Donald Blake is all disheveled, right? And he's literally got a suit of armor made out of the hide of the world serpent. And Loki's like, you're not supposed to be here in this way. Like that's not supposed to, like, I mean, sure, you're supposed to be here, but like not like this. And so as soon as Loki realizes something's up, he goes to attack Donald Blake, and Donald Blake overpowers Loki so fast and is kind of nuts, right? I mean, literally just starts, like he snaps his arm and just starts tearing him apart, right? And he's like, I am not Thor, right? And I never will be again. He literally takes his walking stick and snaps it in half. Now, the significance of this is that if the walking stick is broken, there's no way for Thor to return to the realm of the living. Basically, he cut off Thor's access point. That's the only way, right? The walking stick has to be hit on the ground, struck on the ground, and then that'll cause Donald Blake and Thor to switch back. Donald Blake knows this, destroys the walking stick. Thor's stuck in that realm, right? There's no way to bring him back. And so from there, you have Donald Blake who kind of goes and starts grabbing weapons, but then also looking at like the books that have been written regarding like the legends of Thor. So that's why you see references to like Jake Olsen, you see references to Thunderstrike here, because what this basically meant is that like other people have been playing the role of Thor outside of Donald Blake, and that Donald Blake has seemingly just been confined to this realm for so long and has essentially gone insane. But there is actually another caveat, right? There's another thing that kind of comes into this. The funny thing about it is that as soon as Donald Blake is here, and then once word has reached the ears of the Asgardians that he overpowered Loki, then you have the arrival of Sif, Volstagg, and Beta Ray Bill. And you would think that these three would easily be able to overpower Donald Blake. And for the most part, they would be right in assuming so, because Donald Blake is just a regular guy, or he's just supposed to be. But somehow or another, Donald Blake's power has been elevated to the point that he can take out Loki, which is no small feat, right? One thing to keep in mind, Loki challenged Doctor Strange for the role of Sorcerer Supreme, right? So being able to channel and use that much power is a huge thing. And having Donald Blake being able to overpower him is an even bigger thing. And so when you have Sif and Beta Ray Bill and Volstagg who go to challenge and try to take on Donald Blake, he wrecks them all. Now here's the funny thing about this. He's not just like fighting them the way that a warrior normally would, right? The way that you would see, Beta Ray Bill or Sif or Volstagg fight. Instead, he fights with precision, right? He's got his own little scalpel. That's his weapon. And he fights swift and quickly and making small little cuts, small little jabs here and there. And it's one of the things where because he's able to move so fast and able to overpower these guys so quickly, he takes them all down. The crazy thing about this though is kind of like the big revelation that comes with him is he strips Beta Ray Bill of the enchantment given to him by Odin, right? Basically, a fraction of the Odin force is stripped from Beta Ray Bill and then absorbed in a Donald Blake himself. And once they're all overpowered, they in turn call for reinforcements. And Donald Blake rips through all these reinforcements too, right? He basically grabs Yarnbjorn, the celestially empowered axe, and just cuts a swath through everybody. He's just swathing through everybody. But he's basically cutting through every single one of these guys. And that's a crazy thing here, because literally it's this entire Asgardian army, or seemingly everybody here that could lay waste to him or could in some form or fashion destroy him. He basically takes them all out. He then takes the sword of Sif and then uses it to transport the realm, or transport everybody on Asgard directly to like the blood dimension. Right now, the blood dimension was a dimension that was kind of given to us. It's appeared quite some time in Marvel Comics. It went back a little ways, really to the Doctor Strange stories that we got. But it was really just kind of a realm where you ended up having Loki and Doctor Strange when they were fighting. They ended up like taking their fight to this realm, and then like things popped off and Doctor Strange turned like half the population into bunny rabbits. It was weird, but that's kind of where you get that little bit of a realm from. But for Donald Blake himself, because all the inhabitants inhabitants of Asgard have kind of been teleported away from Asgardia itself. He's the only real occupant there. And so now it's kind of like, okay, like let's go visit some people, right? Let's go find some folks and visit some friends. And so from there, you switch over to Thor talking to the world serpent. And what you end up finding out here is the world serpent had basically managed to find a way into this realm, even though he wasn't supposed to. And then he went to Donald Blake and revealed the reality of Donald Blake to Donald himself. Now, this is something that had quote unquote previously been done, especially during the Shadowed Heroes thing. And that's why I say it really looks like Donny Cates is just kind of removing and ignoring all of that and really just basically saying that the revelation of Donald Blake's life as being one that was fabricated by Odin for the purpose of making Thor humble drives Donald Blake insane, right? It drives him nuts. Now, the whole idea behind this was to reveal to Donald Blake that because he was created by Odin, he possesses a fraction of the Odin force, right? It's a construct. It's like the story of like Adam and Eve, right? That Eve was created from a bone of Adam, therefore Eve is part Adam, which really kind of begs the question, is that like an incestuous relationship? But regardless of that, it's one of these things where because of the fact that Donald Blake was created by Odin, he possesses a portion of Odin's power. And waking Donald Blake up to that, Donald Blake in turn hated the fact that his life was fake. It drove him insane. Then he attacked the world serpent and then stole the power of the world serpent and then killed him, right? So Donald Blake is basically running around with the Odin force. That's essentially what's happening here right now. That's why Donald Blake is so powerful, and that's why he's able to essentially like overpower everybody in Asgard. And so what you end up having is kind of switching back to Donald because of the fact that he's so pissed off. His mission is to essentially punish and or destroy everything related to Thor. And so he ends up visiting a hospital to run into Jane Foster. And so the two of them actually end up sitting down and kind of having dinner together. And things are you know, I mean, they're you know, Donald Blake's not really revealing anything, but it's not as though he immediately goes and attacks her. Instead, it's one of these things where he kind of sees her as a potential means to an end, but there was also a romantic relationship between the two. So in some ways, it really kind of seems like he's just visiting an old friend here. But one of the crazy things that goes on is when you know, Jane Foster reveals that she was Thor at one point. And that kind of drives Donald Blake insane because he's like, wait, no, what, you were Thor? And then like, you know, kind of has this dream revelation where he attacks Jane Foster and like rips the power of Thor out of her, right? The reality of this is she doesn't really contain that power anymore. It was one of the things that Marvel did in the aftermath of Jason Aaron's run, as incredible and amazing as it was. And as much as I would have liked to have seen Jane Foster stay Thor, like I've always said in comics, the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? So you basically ended up having Odinson going back to playing the role of Thor. I kept telling people that. People were complaining about Jane Foster being Thor, so I saw those people who were complaining about Jane Foster being Thor as one of two things. Either they weren't really familiar with comics and they didn't really know that like things would go back to normal, or they did know that and they were just looking for a reason to be pissed off, right? So you know, because of what's gone on with Jane, because she's not really Thor, she's a Valkyrie now, ultimately it's just a wholly different role that's provided for her. And so Donald Blake is just kind of like, okay, like I have to go, right? I have to leave. Sensing the fact that she doesn't really have the power of Thor and is not really tied to the Odin force anymore. And instead, Donald Blake almost kind of takes a bit of arrogance and anger towards her, right? In the sense of saying like you loved me once, not him, right? Like you used to love me. You didn't love Thor. You don't belong as like a morgue's assistant, right? You should go on and do something better in this world. And so what you end up having here is the body of Roger Norvell, which shows up in the morgue. Now, Roger Norvell was a guy who previously defeated Thor. Now, he kind of had like the belt of strength and these gauntlets, and that was really during like Roy Thomas and John Buscema's run on Thor back in Thor 273, I think it was. It was okay, right? It wasn't that great of a story, but the long and short of this is he was a person who was previously Thor. And so Jane Foster starts to put two and two together and come to this realization that with Donald Blake seemingly showing up out of nowhere, and then somebody who had previously played Thor being killed, and then, you know, Donald Blake almost having this sort of anger and rage towards her, a kind of vindictiveness, she comes to the realization that Donald Blake is basically going around and killing Thors. And that's when we have Donald Blake who confronts Throg, right? Now, Throg, of course, was a version of Thor who became a frog and then ultimately was given his own identity just because of the fact that, you know, it was an amazing concept. Thor becoming a frog was one of the coolest things. Initially, it was Loki turning Thor into a frog, and then again, you know, Marvel kind of gave Throg his own role. It was cool, right? It was a really, really cool moment and a cool series of stories back during Simonson's run. But what you end up having here is literally Donald Blake who's being overpowered by Throg. And it's kind of nuts because it's a combination of Throg and Lockjaw, right? Because it was basically like, you know, the Pet Avengers, which was an amazing story for Marvel Comics, but it was basically just like the Pet Avengers, right? So like Lockjaw and like Throg and a few other people, like the Horse of Valkyrie. It was cool, right? It was an awesome concept. But basically like between Lockjaw's ability to teleport and Throg having his own hammer, having his own Mjolnir, they're kind of able to hold their own against Donald Blake. Now it does get to the point where Donald Blake like eats Throg and then just goes to attack Lockjaw, and then like Throg's hammer just comes flying out of the mouth of Donald Blake, and then Throg jumps out and he's like, you really think you could eat me, man? You really think that's what was gonna happen? And so they kind of go toe to toe. Now, of course, Throg basically ends up overpowering Donald Blake by like smashing him in the face and then kind of knocking him unconscious. And then he tells Lockjaw, like, we need to get this guy somewhere, right? Like, I know a doctor that can take care of these kinds of things. But you also have Jane Foster, who's going to visit Doctor Strange as well, right? Because she's trying to find out where the actual Thor is. And of course, getting a hold of one of the Avengers is the only real way to do it. Kind of a nice little touch here. She does go to call Tony Stark, but because of the fact that Odinson, because Thor had written Tony Stark's number on the side of the hammer in that little two-part story we did, where like the old man calls Thor because he lifts his hammer, that Tony Stark basically canceled, he just kind of canceled his number. I mean, it's there. He just has a voicemail, it's a throwaway phone number, and he got a different number instead. So kind of a small, funny little reference of Donny Cates referencing his own work. But then like Throg comes flying out of a window, and then like Lockjaw comes flying out of a window too. And then you have like Donald Blake overpowering Doctor Strange, right? Which makes sense if he's got the Odin Force, right? He's way beyond Doctor Strange at this point. And so then like Jane Foster turns into Valkyrie, goes to try to attack Donald Blake teleports away. And so that's when it's kind of like, okay, this guy's level of power is on a whole new level now, right? Like it's kind of nuts. And so ultimately you have Donald Blake turning his attention to basically destroying attacking the World Tree. And the reason why is because going through and attacking these various forces out there, these various foes who have played the role of Thor, well, for the most part, getting a hold of Throg is one of these things where it was difficult because of the sheer amount of power. His other response is that I'm just going to go and I'm just going to attack, I'm just going to like try to summon Odin, right? If I start attacking the World Tree, Odin's going to have to respond. There's no way Odin would just sit and allow the World Tree to be destroyed. The problem with this is that as he destroys the World Tree, because the realm that Donald Blake was in exists below the World Tree, and because Thor Odinson is there, Thor Odinson is basically being kind of like flooded with this power of the World Tree of Idrisil. It's basically being flooded with like the power of the multiverse is kind of what it is to a degree. And so ultimately you end up having Jane Foster who's like, fine, like we got to go get Odin, right? It's one of these things where they're all kind of leading to the same place. And so she's like, we have to go find this guy. Odin started this. Odin's the only one who can really end it. And so what she ends up doing is basically traveling to like this really unknown destination or unlisted destination and finds Odin getting drunk in a bar. Now here's the important thing to understand here, right? This is Odin as a ceremonial role. Odin gave his power to Thor. When Odin made Thor king of Asgard, he basically gave him the Odin Force. So this is not Odin in all of his power. But I will say, man, Biker Odin looks amazing because that's basically what he is, right? Biker Odin. Let me tell you something, man. If Odin goes back to being like the ruler of Asgard, this is the guy I want to see running Asgard, right? Dude, this guy looks like a member of Hell's Angels. It's amazing. It's so cool. Now, one of the things that's also kind of thrown out here, and we're not really given a whole lot of explanation, is that with everything that's happened with Odin over the years, that Odin is kind of, he seems to have kind of lost himself in a lot of ways. And initially you had Freya who was responding in different ways, right? The struggle of the two of them kind of trying to pull it together. So it was like impacting their marriage. They were talking to a marriage counselor. I didn't know Asgard had those, and I certainly didn't know that Odin needed one. But then Freya takes more of a heavy-handed approach. Then she takes more of a softer approach. And then ultimately she ends up leaving, right? And so by the time that Odin had kind of managed to get himself together to a degree, that he essentially ended up just kind of losing his wife, right? And so was just kind of there by himself and seemed to kind of give up, right? And ultimately pass the power onto Thor. And so there's a little bit of murkiness that goes on here with regards to his character. The only real aftermath we saw with the War of Realms was kind of like the tie-in by Jason Aaron, but that focused more on Thor than it did on Odin, right? So there's a few unexplained questions here that hopefully we'll get an explanation to, unless I've missed something, right? Unless I've missed something huge. But the long and short of this is that you basically have Jane Foster who's like, get it together, man. We have a great big huge thing going on here, right? Like, get it together, Odin. Like, get off your bottle, get off your ass, and like, let's go solve this problem. She's like, you created this. Your son's locked away in some realm below Idrisil. He can't get out. You literally have Donald Blake who's just running around, unleashing all kinds of hell. You got to do something, dude. And so you end up having Odin who's like, okay, fine, right? Odin kind of pulls it together and it's like, okay, cool. Like, I'll grab my armor and we'll go do our thing. When you have that takes place, one of the things that happened is while you did have Sif, who was kind of hanging out with Beta Ray Bill, the sort of romantic attraction between the two of them sort of developed here. I wouldn't say it was a strong romantic attachment. It wasn't like Sif saw Beta Ray Bill as Mr. Right. It was more she saw him as like Mr. Right now is basically what that was, and so like that's where she had the desire to start banging him, and so you basically end up having like Loki who comes along as well, meets up with her, Doctor Strange, and Beta Ray Bill, and is like, we got to find a way to take down Donald Blake, right? Like right now he's destroying the World Tree, he's unleashing holy hell, like we got to do something. And so this draws the attention of Throg along with everybody else who basically show up here, and they're able to kind of hold their own, or at least able to attack Donald Blake, not necessarily overpower him in the most extreme. Instead, when they arrive and he goes on the attack, that you end up having him, basically attacked by Odin. Now, here's the other thing, man. Like, Odin in his armor right now looks even more amazing, right? Like, I don't know if he looks more amazing than like biker Odin. Okay, give me your all's opinion. Which one do you like better? Like armored Odin or biker Odin? Because like, I prefer biker Odin. Dude, he looks badass. Like, dude, it looks amazing. He looks so cool. But yeah, it's one of these cool concepts where Odin is just kind of unleashing hell, right? Just kind of unleashing holy hell, or at least doing what he can. And he even tells Donald Blake, he's like, look, man, I mean, I get that you're pissed, right? I get that you're mad, but here's the problem that you have. You've been striking the power of the world tree, which is a power that has the ability to create worlds, give life, enhance the power of gods. Let me ask you something. If the realm that you lived in was below Yggdrasil and you've escaped from it, but you put Thor there, then you started destroying Yggdrasil and all this power is flowing into the world below you, where do you think it's bleeding to? And that's when you have Odinson, who's just like empowered by all this stuff right now. But here's the caveat to this. Despite all this power that Odinson has now, the power to like create and destroy worlds, he's still stuck down there. And so ultimately he summons his ravens, right, after kind of being able to reach out kind of through this fissure and these cracks. But his ravens are like, we can't bring you to this realm. It's beyond our power to do so. He's like, that's true, but you can take my essence, you can take my soul into that realm. And they're like, yes, but you need a vessel. And he's like, I know, and I have the perfect idea for it. And so while everything's popping off with Donald Blake, and you have like Donald Blake who's getting ready to go and attack Odin, suddenly Thor reappears, this time in the destroyer armor. And then he's got like destroyer written on the chest, which is epic as hell, man. It looks amazing. It's like the Thor version of Superboy Prime. It looks so cool. So you basically got the power of Thor with this kind of enhancement that came from the tree of Yggdrasil, which is bolstered by the power of the destroyer armor. And now he's going on a rampage to take out Donald Blake. Now, here's the funny thing about this. This is Donald Blake with seemingly the full might of the Odin force. I wouldn't say it's like the totality of it, because some of it's still inside of Thor. But that's kind of one of the things that Donny Cates plays with. If Donald Blake transfers, if he jumps to what is basically Asgard, Thor's confined in the realm below Yggdrasil, does all that Odin force power of Thor transfer itself to Donald Blake? And the answer seems to be yes, right? In fact, Donald Blake is able to use the enchantment, or at least able to pick up the hammer because the enchantment's screwed up. But it's one of these things where it's not like I'm Donald Blake and I've got the hammer of Thor. It's nothing like that. He goes to talk trash and Thor's like, nope, and like punches the crap out of him with the destroyer armor, just overpowers him. And then it's just kind of like, this is done, right? No more words, no nothing. This is completely and totally finished. And so at that point, he goes to attack the destroyer armor and then starts to siphon off the Odin force from Thor. And he's like, did you really believe that for me, a person who can siphon off the Odin force from pretty much anybody who has it, that the destroyer armor would be able to overpower me? And so at that point, Odin's like, enough. And he calls Mjolnir to himself. And then Mjolnir is intercepted by Beta Ray Bill, who finally gets it back. And it's like, dude, Beta Ray Bill hasn't had Mjolnir in like 20 years, man. So like, it's so cool to see him back as like old school Beta Ray Bill. This is why I say, man, dude, Donny Cates, man, let me tell you something. Donny Cates, son, man, dude, it's nuts, man. It's amazing, right? That's why I tell you guys, man, Donny Cates' writing is legit. Dude, this guy can write anything, man. Like, he's in my top 3 favorite writers of all time now. And so he's just kind of like, no, right? Like I am owed a weapon, right? Like Thor destroyed my Stormbreaker. I am owed a weapon, and I will have a weapon. So he's like, if Stormbreaker's gone, I'll take back Mjolnir, right? I've wielded it before. It's my hammer now, right? This is my weapon now. Dude, he starts spinning that thing up, and he's like, let's get to it now, boys. Dude, it's amazing, right? It's amazing. And so at that point, like, he immediately goes at, like, he just sends it flying to Donald Blake, which basically distracts him. And then you get this really interesting moment here, right? This is a really interesting moment. Doctor Strange summons the Crimson Bands of Sidorak, which are able to ensnare Donald Blake and then hold him in place. This is while Donald Blake has the Odin Force. Here's a question that I would pose to you guys. If the Crimson Bands of Sidorak can ensnare someone who possesses the Odin Force and then keep them confined, does that mean that the entity Sidorak is more powerful than Odin? That's my question. I don't know the answer to that, because there's a lot of variables here, right? Does Donald Blake have the full totality of the Odin Force? If he does he know how to use it in such a way where he can overpower Sidorak? Or is Sidorak's power really just greater than that of Odin? I don't know the answer to that question. You're talking about two different beings who have never met and who have never actually fought each other, so we don't really know the depths of that. But ultimately, when Donald Blake is just kind of like confined, the whole idea of Donald Blake is just like, kill me, right? Just make me nothing. like in this suffering of living a life that was never my own, right? Knowing that I was just created for the purpose of like teaching a lesson to some guy. In this nothing life that I have, like destroy me. And so you end up basically having like both Thor and Loki who are like, no, like Odin, do not do that. Like, do not kill him. And so Loki ends up reconstituting the walking stick of Donald Blake and then basically throwing it to Thor in his destroyer armor. And then Thor smashes it on the ground and Donald Blake vanishes before Odin can kill him, right? Now, of course, Thor takes his hammer back, but it's one of these things where it's like, you cannot kill him, right? You cannot destroy him, right? Technically, like, he's a brother of mine. And then he just like reads the riot act to Odin, right? And that's the crazy thing, right? Like Odin's like, this is my problem, son. I should be the one to fix it. And Thor's like, yeah, all of this is your fault, right? All of this is your fault, Pops. But understand, you are not the king of Asgard anymore. I am. I'm the one who runs the show here. You gave your power to me. So get the hell out of here, right? Like, go. And it's kind of nuts to see Thor talking to Odin in that way. And he's like, I trust you can see your way out. And Odin beseeches Thor as best he can, but Thor's like, I don't care. Like, we're gonna have a reckoning. Like, make no mistake, do not be confused about your place in the bigger picture, Pops. We're gonna have a reckoning. And you and I are gonna come to an understanding. You understand what I'm saying? Like, that's what's gonna happen. But at the moment, I got bigger fish to fry. I've got bigger things to worry about. And so ultimately, Odin basically ends up leaving Asgard, right? He's cast out yet again. And so Donald Blake is just kind of freed by, not really freed and allowed to go by Thor, but one of these things where he's kind of like, understand, like, you are made from my flesh, right? You are made as a part of me, and therefore you are a brother unto me. And that's cool and everything, but know that like this kind of thing can't stand. And so he basically goes and attacks him. and not really attacks him, but like has him struck by lightning and knocked out. And then he asks Loki, he's like, what should I do here? And he's like, is like, do you want me to lie? You want me to lie to you now? Right? Like, you want me to tell you like some falsehood or something like that? Like, I'm going to take him somewhere and I'm going to put him away. And ultimately, Thor's just kind of like, no, like, I don't want to know what you're going to do with him, but just get him out of my sight, right? Just handle it, right? Because Loki's like, I'll handle this, man, but do you really want to know what I'm going to do? And so because of that, what you end up having is Donald Blake basically becoming the new god of lies and just taken below, to kind of encounter and deal with the serpent, where he's effectively tied up, chained up, and sort of left there forevermore. Now, the reality of this is Donny Cates putting Donald Blake on the back burner so he can bring him back at a future point in time. That's really all this is. But because of the fact that Loki's no longer the god of lies and he's the god of myths and stories, that there has to always be a god of lies. And that's now Donald Blake, who's basically taken that role. And he'll just stay here and he'll suffer for seemingly all eternity or until someone frees him. But this story is amazing. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.